The frigid air of the Seattle morning bit at my cheeks as I stepped out of my sleek electric vehicle, the familiar scent of damp earth and artisanal coffee doing little to calm the rising anxiety in my chest. At 62, I, Miley Vance, a former investigative journalist whose career was built on unearthing uncomfortable truths, found myself grappling with a personal one that threatened to shatter the very foundation of my world. My hands, usually steady as I navigated complex data trails and interviewed reluctant sources, trembled slightly as I clutched the lukewarm latte. Asher's usual extra cream, no sugar. I was early for his haircut appointment, a small gesture of maternal dedication, a fleeting moment I cherished amidst his increasingly distant existence. I spotted him immediately through the salon's floor-to-ceiling windows, his dark hair already being sectioned by a stylist I didn't recognize. Asher, my Asher, the boy I'd raised from infancy, the child who had filled the gaping void in my life after my own sister's tragic passing, a void I thought could never be healed. He was talking, a casual, easy flow of conversation I rarely heard directed at me anymore. I paused by a discreet wall of artificial greenery near the reception desk, a smile forming on my lips, ready to surprise him. But the smile never quite reached my eyes. "She's not my mom." Asher's voice drifted through the hum of blow dryers and soft, rhythmic pop music. Casual, almost dismissive. Just someone who raised me. My coffee cup froze mid-air, its warmth suddenly irrelevant against the icy shock that seized me. The stylist chuckled, light and unaware. "Oh, like a nanny or something." Asher gave a lazy shrug. "I don't know. Sort of. The world, with its vibrant buzz of activity, dimmed to a suffocating silence, replaced by a high-pitched ring in my ears. The casual detachment in his voice, the ease with which he'd reduced our 2 decades of shared life to a mere footnote, a transactional arrangement, sent a fissure through my heart so profound I felt it in my bones. No anger, no apology, just casual dismissal from the boy I called my son. I turned on my heel, a phantom pain twisting in my gut, and walked out into the crisp afternoon sun, the salon's door chime tinkling behind me like a cruel little bell of truth. The coffee, still warm in my hand, felt utterly ridiculous. Back in my car, the engine off, I stared through the windshield at nothing, the vibrant life of the Seattle street passing by like a distant movie I wasn't part of anymore. His words, indifferent and detached, just someone who raised me, clung to me like wet fabric. My mind reeled through 2 decades of memories, each one a sharp, agonizing stab. I had braided his hair when he was 8, self-conscious about a cowlick that wouldn't cooperate. I had stayed up through chickenpox, stomach bugs, and heartbreaks he never quite spoke about. I had packed lunches with little notes, even when he pretended not to notice. Every moment, every sacrifice, was that all it meant to him? A role? A placeholder? I closed my eyes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles blanched. Was this my fault? Had I protected him too much, or not enough? Had I tried so hard to be his mother that I forgot to ask if he even wanted one? The past unraveled in flashes, his tiny hand clutching mine at the courthouse when my husband, Arthur, and I finalized his guardianship after my sister's passing. His silence at 13 when his biological mom, Lorraine, tried calling from rehab, a voice from a past we rarely spoke of. The subtle shift, the way he'd started saying Miley instead of Mom after turning 17. Each moment had felt small on its own, easily dismissed as teenage rebellion or a craving for independence. But together, they told a story I hadn't wanted to read. I was losing him. The passenger door opened suddenly, pulling me from my agonizing reverie. Asher slid into the seat, hair damp from the rinse, eyes glued to his phone. "Hey," he said casually. "Didn't know you were coming." I nodded, swallowing the lump forming in my throat. "I thought I'd bring you your coffee." He took it without looking. "Thanks. You didn't have to." He was right. I didn't have to. And maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't anymore. I watched him sip from the cup, eyes still on the screen. The silence between us was no longer comfortable. It was cavernous. He didn't even realize what he'd said. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. As I pulled onto the road, my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw a name I hadn't thought about in years. Lorraine, Asher's birth mother. A voice inside me whispered, maybe it's time to tell him the truth. The silence between us grew thicker, a palpable weight in the car. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. The quiet in the house later that evening felt intentional, charged like the hum of electricity right before a storm. Asher barely spoke after we got home. He went straight to his room, door shut, headphones on. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the untouched dinner I'd reheated more out of habit than hunger. The clink of the spoon against the pot was the only sound I allowed myself to make. I knocked once before opening his door. "Do you want something to eat?" He didn't look up. "I'm good." "Okay," I said softly, lingering. "Just if you change your mind." He didn't respond. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, the blue light of the digital clock casting long shadows across the room. Every hour that passed added weight to the silence. By morning, my pillow was damp, my eyes swollen, and my resolve thinner than ever. I sent him a text after he left for class. "Can we talk later? I'd really like to understand how you're feeling." No reply. That afternoon, I tried again. "I'm sorry if I've pushed too hard. I just want to be close with you. Always have." Still nothing. By the time the third message went unread, I stopped checking. It wasn't just the silence. It was the absence in it, like he'd shut a door and locked it from the inside, leaving me in the hallway, knocking, hoping. I found myself standing in front of his baby pictures later that evening, the hallway dim and quiet. He was so small in them, with soft cheeks, a crooked grin, and eyes that had once trusted me without question. I touched the frame gently, as if trying to conjure that little boy back. But that boy had vanished, and maybe I'd helped push him away. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, scrolling through our old text thread. Months ago, he'd sent me memes, random grocery requests, even the occasional "love you" when I reminded him to eat. Lately, a cold trail of one-word replies. I thought it was stress. I thought he just needed space. Now I wasn't so sure. Had I mistaken mothering for smothering? All those years of giving, of putting him first, had it chipped away at his independence until he resented me for it? I didn't want to believe that, but the silence said what he wouldn't. At 7:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. I grabbed it, heart leaping, irrationally hopeful. "Miley, stop treating me like a kid. No greeting, no punctuation, just that." I read it 3 times. Then, once more. Slower. It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. I sat very still, phone resting in my lap like a weight. Outside, the sky had turned the color of bruised peaches, the first stars blinking on behind the thinning clouds. I could feel the old instinct rising. Text back. Explain myself. Fix it. But something in me paused, held me. Maybe this was the moment I had to stop chasing. Maybe love didn't always mean running after someone when they walked away. But if I didn't reach for him, what would be left of us? I opened a blank message, fingers hovering above the keyboard. But instead of texting Asher, I typed a single word and saved it to drafts. Lorraine. I stared at the name, heart pounding. Was it time to bring his birth mother into the silence? Or would that shatter everything for good? The answer, I knew, lay not just in my emotional turmoil, but in the methodical pursuit of facts, a discipline honed over decades. I needed to understand. I needed to investigate. The name Lorraine pulsed on my screen, a single, potent word that held the weight of 2 decades of unspoken history, of deliberate silence. For years, I had believed that shielding Asher from the complexities of his biological mother's life, her struggles with addiction, her transient existence, her inability to provide the stability he desperately needed, was an act of profound maternal love. My late husband, Arthur, and I had made that difficult decision together, convinced it was for Asher's own good. But now, as his words at the salon echoed, just someone who raised me, the protective facade I had built around him, and myself, felt like a crumbling fortress. Lorraine's sudden presence, A phantom buzz on my phone after years of absence felt less like a coincidence and more like a sign, an omen. I was Miley Vance, a woman who built her reputation, and frankly, her comfortable life, on asking the uncomfortable questions, on peeling back layers of deceit, on exposing the hidden truths that others preferred to keep buried. My career as an investigative journalist wasn't just a job. It was a calling, a deeply ingrained part of my identity. I had cut my teeth exposing corrupt politicians in Washington, D.C., then moved on to unraveling complex corporate frauds on Wall Street, and later, shone a light on human rights abuses in war-torn regions. My work had earned me Pulitzers, death threats, and a reputation for relentless, unflinching pursuit of truth. I learned to read between the lines, to connect seemingly disparate dots, and to trust my gut instincts even when the evidence was still nascent. Yet, when it came to my own life, to Asher, I had chosen silence, a deliberate blindness, a suspension of my own critical faculties. That ended now. The next morning, instead of my usual routine of poring over financial reports for my pro bono work with the Seattle Innocence Project, work that used my analytical skills to free the wrongly convicted, I opened an encrypted browser and typed in a name I hadn't dared to search in years. Lorraine Harper. My fingers, muscle memory from countless late nights in dimly lit newsrooms, flew across the keyboard. Public records, social media deep dives, old news archives. I accessed every database, every obscure forum, every digital breadcrumb I could find. Lorraine had always been a ghost, a whisper in Asher's nascent years, a tragic figure who had left him on our doorstep, barely a year old, promising to return when things were better. Things, of course, never got better for her, at least not in any conventional sense. She drifted, in and out of rehab, in and out of petty trouble, a cycle of self-destruction that I had meticulously monitored from a distance, just enough to ensure she wasn't a direct threat to Asher, but never close enough to truly engage. What I found now, however, was unsettlingly different. A new Lorraine, not the lost, broken woman I remembered, but one who seemed to have found a sudden, inexplicable footing. She had changed her last name from Harper to Vance, adopting the surname Asher carried. A small detail, but to my finely tuned journalistic instincts, it rang like a discordant note in a carefully composed symphony. She was living in a quaint, surprisingly upscale bungalow in a quiet neighborhood in Tacoma, a far cry from the cramped, dilapidated apartments she used to inhabit. There were no obvious signs of a legitimate job, no public records of significant inheritance, yet the property records showed it was paid for in cash almost a year ago. Cash. That word blared in my mind like a siren. It triggered an immediate red flag, a primal warning system honed over decades of uncovering financial impropriety. Who pays for a house in cash with no discernible income? This was more than just a lucky break. It smacked of something covert, something illicit. A shadow, long dormant, began to stretch across my carefully ordered life. I widened my search, digging deeper, past the superficial social media profiles and into the darker, less visible corners of the internet. I traced every public contact, every associated name, every digital footprint linked to Lorraine Vance. And then, I found him. Not a direct link to Lorraine, but a name that appeared in several obscure forums, a name whispered in online communities that dealt in less than savory financial dealings. Silas Croft. He was a ghost in the legitimate world. No public presence, no traceable business. But in the underbelly of the dark web, his name was synonymous with illicit financial transactions, shell corporations, and the quiet, untraceable movement of vast sums of money. He was known for exploiting vulnerabilities, for finding people in desperate situations, and offering solutions that always came with a steep, hidden price. A chill snaked down my spine. What could Lorraine possibly have to do with someone like Silas Croft? And more importantly, what could this mean for Asher? My journalistic instincts, dormant for too long when it came to my personal life, roared back to life with a vengeance. This wasn't just about a son's casual cruelty anymore. This felt like a dangerous puzzle, a web of intrigue that threatened to ensnare Asher, whether he knew it or not. I drove to Tacoma the next day, not to Lorraine's house, but to the coffee shop down the street from it. I sat for hours, nursing a lukewarm Americano, observing. Lorraine emerged mid-morning, not looking like the disheveled, haunted woman of my memories, but polished, composed, almost serene. She had a new haircut, a tasteful wardrobe, and an air of quiet confidence I'd never seen her possess. She was meeting someone, a man. Not Silas Croft, but someone who moved with a similar, almost imperceptible stealth. He was impeccably dressed, carried a slim briefcase, and spoke in hushed tones, his eyes constantly scanning the room. My old instinct screamed. Handler. My fingers flew across my encrypted tablet, a subtle movement beneath the table, as I snapped a few discreet, high-resolution photos. A quick facial recognition scan through my private, illegally built database confirmed my suspicions. The man was known. A low-level fixer, a ghost known for laundering money and setting up anonymous offshore accounts for questionable clients. His name was Dominic Dom Rossi. He was one of Croft's operatives. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture far more disturbing than I could have imagined. This was no longer a personal family drama. This was something far more sinister, something that hummed with the dangerous current of illegal dealings. Was Lorraine merely a pawn? Or was she actively involved? And how did Asher fit into this complex, perilous equation? I decided to observe Lorraine more closely, setting up a discreet surveillance operation worthy of any major news investigation. My former contacts, a network of seasoned private investigators, cyber sleuths, and a few ethical hackers I had cultivated over the years, were cautiously brought into my confidence. They knew me. They knew I wouldn't drag them into anything frivolous. They knew when Miley Vance called, it was because she smelled blood in the water, and it was usually the blood of powerful, corrupt individuals. What we uncovered over the next few weeks was a chilling tapestry of deceit. Lorraine, it appeared, was not just a recipient of Croft's money. She was actively involved in a sophisticated scheme. It seemed she was acting as a front, buying up undervalued properties, often through shady foreclosure auctions, then quickly reselling them at inflated prices to shell corporations linked to Croft. The Tacoma bungalow was just one of many. This wasn't small-time fraud. This was large-scale money laundering, a sophisticated operation disguised as legitimate real estate investment. There was one particularly tense evening when Leo, my cybersecurity expert, almost blew our cover. He was attempting to breach a highly encrypted server that held Croft's full financial ledgers, the holy grail of our investigation. The server, located in a supposedly anonymous data farm in Iceland, was protected by layers of advanced firewalls and AI-driven defense systems. Leo, usually a blur of confident keystrokes, grew increasingly agitated. "It's a ghost in the machine, Miley," he'd muttered, his brow furrowed, sweat beading on his forehead. "Every time I get close, it shifts. It's like it knows I'm there." I sat beside him, my own heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Stay calm, Leo. Remember your breathing. He's designed it to make you panic. That's how they find you." Just as he was about to make a critical move, a small red warning light flashed on his screen. An IP trace. Someone was trying to pinpoint his location. I slammed my hand on the emergency cutoff switch. The screens went dark. Silence. We sat there for a long moment. The only sound, the frantic thrum of our own heartbeats. "Too close," I whispered, wiping a bead of sweat from my temple. "We need another way in." That near miss only solidified my conviction that Croft was far more dangerous, and his network far more sophisticated than we had initially assumed. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a master manipulator, and he had his hooks deep into Lorraine. But the most disturbing discovery came from an anonymous tip, a digital whisper sent to one of my deep web contacts, a hacker known only as Cypher. It was a cryptic message, hinting at something called the Harper Legacy Trust, a trust fund, set up for Asher, but not by me or Arthur, and its terms were unusual. It stipulated that Asher would gain full access to a substantial sum, millions, upon his 21st birthday, but only if he was reunited with his biological mother, Lorraine Harper, and severed all legal and personal ties with his adoptive parents, namely, me. The trust had been quietly established years ago, around the time Asher was 13, just when he started pulling away from me, just when Lorraine first tried to re-establish contact. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about money laundering. This was about a calculated, insidious plot to manipulate my son, to weaponize his own past against him, to steal him away for financial gain. The Harper Legacy Trust was a brilliant, wicked trap designed to alienate Asher from me, and ultimately to make him a pliable tool in Lorraine's, and by extension, Silas Croft's, illicit schemes. Asher's casual dismissal of me at the salon, just someone who raised me, wasn't just a thoughtless teenage remark. It was the chilling echo of a programmed narrative, subtly instilled into his mind over years by a manipulative force. Now, Asher's increasingly distant behavior, his coldness, his resentment, all began to make a terrifying, heartbreaking sense. It wasn't just teenage angst. It was the fruit of a carefully planted seed of doubt, watered by the promise of immense, effortless wealth and the allure of a biological connection he barely remembered. The situation escalated quickly. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable evidence that would not only expose Lorraine and Croft but also protect Asher from falling deeper into their web. I needed to infiltrate their operation, to access their digital ledgers, their shell company documents, their communications. It was a dangerous, high-stakes game, precisely the kind of challenge my investigative spirit thrived on. But this time, the stakes were personal. This time, my son's future was on the line. I assembled my small, trusted team. There was Leo, a brilliant young cybersecurity expert who operated on the fringes of legality, driven by a deep-seated desire to expose corporate malfeasance. And then there was Dr. Elena Petrova, a renowned forensic psychologist, whose insights into coercive control and psychological manipulation would be invaluable. We set up a covert operations center in the basement of my Beacon Hill brownstone, a war room adorned with whiteboards covered in flowcharts of shell companies, photos of Lorraine and Rossi, and complex network diagrams. The smell of stale coffee and electronic circuitry became our constant companions, a grim symphony of our relentless pursuit. Our initial findings revealed the true scope of the Harper Legacy Trust. It wasn't just a few million. It was tied to a complex web of offshore accounts, hidden assets, and illicit earnings from Croft's various criminal enterprises. The trust was, in essence, a sophisticated money laundering conduit, designed to clean dirty money through seemingly legitimate real estate transactions, with Asher as the unwitting, or perhaps soon-to-be willing, beneficiary. The ultimate goal wasn't just to give Asher a fortune, it was to use him as a legal loophole, a clean slate through which to funnel and legitimize billions. The thought made my blood run cold. They weren't just taking my son, they were turning him into a criminal asset. One evening, as I was analyzing a particularly complex financial ledger, a digital maze of transactions that twisted and turned across continents, an alert flashed on Leo's screen. Asher. He was meeting Lorraine. Not at her Tacoma bungalow, but at a secluded, high-end restaurant in downtown Seattle, one known for its discreet private dining rooms. This was it. This was the moment. They were either going to reveal the full truth to him, or push him further into their sinister plan. I had to be there. But not as Miley Vance, Asher's heartbroken mother. I had to be Miley Vance, the investigative journalist, the master of disguise, the woman who blended seamlessly into any environment, observing without being observed. I quickly changed into a sophisticated, unassuming outfit, a dark wig, and a pair of discreet, technologically advanced glasses that could record audio and video without detection. I was no stranger to covert operations, but this was different. Every fiber of my being screamed with a raw, primal fear, a fear for my son. I arrived at the restaurant, slipping into a quiet corner table with a perfect vantage point of their private dining room. Through the tinted glass, I could see them. Lorraine, radiant and poised, exuding an almost predatory charm. Her eyes, usually haunted in my memories, now gleamed with a cold, calculating ambition. And Asher, listening intently, a flicker of something new in his eyes, a mixture of fascination, ambition, and a touch of bewilderment. He was on the precipice, teetering between the life he knew and the gilded cage they were offering him. I activated the audio recording feature on my glasses, straining to hear their hushed conversation. Bits and pieces drifted to me. Your real legacy, Asher. Not that. Stifling. Mundane life. Lorraine's voice was like honey, laced with venom. Financial freedom. Unimaginable opportunities. A life Miley could never provide. Miley would never understand. She's just ordinary. The words cut me, a familiar ache in my chest, but I pushed the pain down, focusing on the insidious manipulation. Lorraine was systematically dismantling my identity in Asher's mind, painting me as a drab, unadventurous figure, a stark contrast to the dazzling, limitless future she was promising him. Doctor. Petrova's words echoed in my mind. Manipulators isolate their targets by demonizing those who truly care for them. Then, a name, spoken softly, chillingly, by Lorraine. Silas Croft. My heart pounded against my ribs. She was bringing Croft into it. She was laying out the full scope of their plan. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, control, and pulling Asher into a criminal underworld he couldn't possibly comprehend. I watched as Lorraine pulled out a thick, leather-bound document, sliding it across the table to Asher. It was the Harper Legacy Trust Agreement. Asher picked it up, his eyes widening as he skimmed the pages, the numbers, the clauses that detailed his inheritance, and the conditions attached. The severance of ties with me, the adoption of his birth mother's surname, the implicit understanding of his role in their operation. A cold, clinical contract designed to sever a bond of love and replace it with one of transactional dependency. I had to act. Not yet. Not directly. I needed Asher to see the truth for himself, to witness Lorraine's true nature, not just hear it from me. I pulled out my phone, quickly texting Leo. Initiate Phase 2. Now. Leo, from our basement war room, unleashed a precisely timed, surgically targeted digital attack. Not against the restaurant's systems, but against Asher's phone. A discreet, anonymous pop-up notification appeared on his screen, just as he was about to sign the trust document. It was a secure link, disguised as a news alert. Asher, momentarily distracted by the subtle vibration, clicked on it. On the screen of his phone, flashing for just a few seconds, were meticulously compiled images and documents. Photos of Lorraine meeting with Dominic Rossi, the shadowy fixer, in various clandestine locations. Screenshots of massive bank transfers from shell corporations linked directly to Silas Croft, showing the vast sums of illicit money being moved. A concise, hard-hitting summary detailing the money laundering scheme, its potential legal ramifications, and the Harper Legacy Trust explicitly identified as a front for illicit funds, with a stark warning about Asher's potential unwitting, or worse, knowing, involvement. And at the bottom, a single, damning headline, culled from a buried article I'd once written years ago about a notorious organized crime figure. Croft's Conduits. The Invisible Hands of Illicit Wealth. Asher's face went white. He looked up from his phone, his eyes darting between the screen and Lorraine, a dawning horror spreading across his features. The fascination, the ambition, evaporated, replaced by raw fear and disbelief. He saw it. He saw her. The truth, in all its ugly clarity, had shattered the illusion. Lorraine, sensing the shift, snatched his phone, her composure finally cracking. Her eyes, usually so calculating, now flared with a desperate, animalistic rage. What is this? This is a lie! This is Miley! That manipulative old hag, she's trying to poison you against me. Don't you see? She's always been jealous. She never wanted you to have a real mother. Her words were shrill, venomous, cutting through the restaurant's soft ambiance, drawing startled glances from nearby diners. The sophisticated veneer had completely crumbled, revealing the desperate, cornered woman beneath. Asher pulled back, recoiling from her fury, from the sudden, grotesque transformation of the woman who had promised him a dazzling future. He saw her for what she truly was. Not a loving biological mother, but a manipulative, desperate pawn in a dangerous game, willing to sacrifice her own son's future for illicit gain. The spell was broken. I stood up from my table, shedding the dark wig and glasses, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. My posture was straight, my gaze unwavering. I walked towards their table, no longer hiding, no longer a ghost. Lorraine's eyes widened in horror when she saw me, her face draining of color. Her jaw dropped, and a guttural sound escaped her throat. "Miley, you witch! You set this up! You ruined everything!" she shrieked, flailing her arms. I ignored her, my gaze fixed on Asher. His face was a contorted mask of confusion, betrayal, and a deep, agonizing shame. He looked like a child caught in a nightmare, finally waking up to the monster. "Asher," I said, my voice steady, though my heart ached with a raw maternal pain. "The truth isn't always easy to hear. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes it's cruel. But it's always, ultimately, necessary. And it always, always sets you free." He looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in months. The coldness in his eyes had melted, replaced by a raw, vulnerable pain, a desperate plea for understanding. "Miley, what? What have I done?" His voice was barely a whisper. "You've been lied to, Asher," I said, my voice softening, reaching for his hand across the table, a gesture he didn't pull away from. His hand felt cold, trembling slightly in mine. "Manipulated, exploited. But you haven't done anything you can't undo. Not yet. We can fix this, Asher. Together." Lorraine, seeing her carefully constructed facade crumbling, tried one last desperate maneuver. With a primal scream of rage and frustration, she grabbed the trust document, tearing it in half, the ripped paper fluttering uselessly to the floor. Then, with a sudden, violent lunge, she moved towards Asher, her eyes blazing with a wild, cornered fury. "You'll get nothing! Nothing! I'll make sure you both lose everything! I'll burn it all down." But before she could reach him, a team of federal agents, discreetly alerted by Leo's last anonymous digital drop, swept into the restaurant. They had been tracking Silas Croft's network for months, and my timely intelligence, the culmination of my investigation, had provided them with the final, crucial piece of the puzzle: the meeting, the trust document, and Lorraine's direct involvement as a primary operative. Lorraine Harper Vance, as she now insisted on calling herself, was apprehended, her dramatic outburst silenced by the cold, metallic click of handcuffs. Dominic Rossi, her handler, was caught trying to slip out a back exit, his sophisticated demeanor replaced by a look of panicked defeat. The operation was over. The restaurant, moments ago a tableau of quiet luxury, was now a scene of chaos and flashing lights. The whispers of the diners replaced by the stern voices of law enforcement. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, debriefings with federal agents, and, most importantly, painstaking, raw conversations with Asher. He was devastated, not just by Lorraine's betrayal, but by his own naivete, his casual dismissal of me, and the terrifying realization of how close he had come to becoming entangled in a criminal enterprise of monumental scale. The shame was a palpable, suffocating presence between us, a thick wall that needed to be slowly, painstakingly dismantled. "Miley," he said one evening, his voice hoarse, his eyes red, rimmed, and bloodshot from sleepless nights. I don't know how to apologize. I called you, just someone who raised me. And all this time, you were saving me. From her. From myself. You risked everything." I sat beside him on the old, worn couch in my living room. The same couch where I'd read him countless bedtime stories, where I'd comforted him through childhood fears, where I'd lectured him on the importance of integrity. I took his hand, tracing the lines on his palm, feeling the tremor in his fingers. "Asher, you are my son. Not by blood, but by every fiber of my being, by every choice I've ever made, by every moment of love I've poured into you. And that can never be undone. But true apologies, my dear boy, are not just words. They are actions. They are change. They are understanding the weight of your words and the profound impact of your choices. They are earning back trust, not demanding it. He nodded, tears silently streaming down his face, a silent acknowledgement of the deep wound he had inflicted. I want to change, Miley. I want to be the son you deserve, the man you raised me to be. And he did. Asher, shaken but not broken, took a leave from college, not to wallow in self-pity, but to genuinely heal and reevaluate his life's trajectory. He began volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring at-risk teens, using his own painful experience as a cautionary tale against the allure of easy money and false promises. He enrolled in an ethics course at a community college, devouring texts on philosophy and moral reasoning, seeking a deeper understanding of integrity and consequence. He spent hours with me, truly listening, truly connecting, asking questions about my past, my work, the challenges I'd faced, the truths I'd uncovered. Our bond, once strained to breaking point, began to reform, stronger and more profound than before, forged in the crucible of truth and mutual respect. The silence between us, once a chasm, was now filled with the quiet, comforting hum of genuine understanding. Lorraine, after a lengthy investigation, faced a litany of charges for her involvement with Silas Croft's money laundering operation. Her attempts to deflect, blame, and paint herself as a victim crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Croft himself, a phantom for so long, a shadowy figure pulling strings from behind the scenes, was finally apprehended through the meticulous evidence I had helped compile, and his vast criminal network dismantled, illicite tendrils severed. Justice, slow and arduous, had finally prevailed. As for me, Miley Vance, the investigative journalist who became an accidental mother and then a reluctant detective in her own family drama, I found a new purpose, a profound redefinition of my life's work. My experience with Asher, with Lorraine's insidious manipulation, reignited my passion for uncovering truth, but with a sharpened focus on the vulnerabilities of young people, especially those from complex family backgrounds. I launched a new nonprofit organization, The Unseen Threads, dedicated to providing mentorship, psychological support, and legal guidance to young adults who were being covertly manipulated or exploited by estranged family members or predatory figures seeking to leverage their pasts for illicit gain. My journalistic skills, once focused on corporate corruption and international intrigue, were now channeled into protecting the most vulnerable. Young, impressionable minds, caught in unseen webs of deceit, often woven by those who should have protected them. The Unseen Threads quickly gained traction, becoming a beacon of hope for countless families grappling with similar issues. We developed a network of pro bono lawyers, ethical hackers, and child psychologists, all dedicated to untangling the complex webs of manipulation that often preyed on young adults seeking connection or financial independence. I oversaw case after case, each one a testament to the quiet, insidious power of unseen forces seeking to exploit the emotional vulnerabilities of youth. We weren't just fighting legal battles. We were fighting for the very souls of these young people, guiding them back to authentic connections and away from the allure of quick riches and false promises. One young woman, separated from her ailing grandfather by a greedy aunt who sought to control his estate, was reunited with him through our intervention. Another young man, nearly lured into a pyramid scheme disguised as a legitimate business by a charismatic mentor, was shown the truth before he lost his life savings. These small victories, accumulated day by day, became my new Pulitzers, my new front-page stories, written not in ink, but in the reclaimed lives of the vulnerable. My relationship with Asher flourished. He chose to formally change his last name from Vance to Vance Harper, a decision he made himself, not out of obligation, but as a symbolic gesture. He wasn't abandoning his biological roots, but he was choosing to define himself by the love and values I had instilled in him, acknowledging both his past and the profound reality of our shared present. It was a testament to his growth, to his newfound understanding of true identity and the sacrifices made for him. One quiet afternoon, as we sat on my porch, watching the last golden rays of the setting sun dance across the Puget Sound, casting long, peaceful shadows across the water. Asher turned to me, a gentle smile on his face, a warmth in his eyes that had been missing for too long. "Miley," he said, his voice soft, full of warmth, laden with a newfound maturity. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for loving me enough to fight for me, even when I was too blind to see it. You are my mom, Miley, more than anyone else could ever be." I looked at him, my heart overflowing with a quiet, profound joy. He was no longer the boy who saw me as just someone who raised him. He was a young man, discerning, empathetic, and profoundly grateful. He was my son in every way that mattered. "Asher, my dear," I replied, taking his hand in mine, my fingers intertwined with his, a silent testament to our unbreakable bond. The touch was firm, reassuring, a promise of a future built on honesty and love. Love isn't always easy. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it demands that you dig deep, that you fight battles you never imagined, that you confront truths you'd rather keep buried. But it is always, always worth it. Because true family isn't about shared blood. It's about shared loyalty, shared values, and an unwavering commitment to each other's well-being. It's about choosing to stand by someone, even when they're pushing you away, even when they don't understand. It's about being their anchor in the storm, their light in the darkness, and their truth when they're lost and vulnerable to the shadows. It's about the quiet, consistent act of showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The journey had been harrowing, filled with moments of profound doubt and heart-wrenching pain. But through it all, I had learned a truth far more precious than any headline I had ever written, any criminal I had ever exposed. I learned that the most powerful love is the one that chooses courage over comfort, truth over pretense, and unwavering connection over casual dismissal. It is the love that empowers, that liberates, that transforms. It is the love that truly, eternally raises. And sometimes, the most profound acts of motherhood are not found in gentle lullabies or perfectly packed lunches, but in the fierce, relentless pursuit of a truth that sets your child free. It is in those unseen threads of connection, loyalty, and relentless truth-seeking that the strongest families are truly forged, enduring through any storm, emerging stronger, wiser, and more profoundly connected than ever before.